But the ramifications of saying that we have to acknowledge somebody legally who identifies as a bobcat, you understand, would be insurmountable. The ramifications would be all sorts of new legal identifications that would be required, which don't currently exist.
As a gender?
Well, I would love it if you want to sit down afterward, and I would love to sit down and have continue this conversation. I would. Well, thank you, Thomas. Are you done?
Yeah.
I appreciate it, Thomas. Thank you.
I'm Madison. I'm co-president of Spectrum, the LGBT organization on campus.
Great.
Love to talk to you about this.
Great. Thank you, Madison. My name's Steven.
Okay.
I appreciate it. You sitting down, and what is it that you disagree with?
So I think you happen to be, you're confused on the idea of gender versus sex.
I'm confused, okay?
Yeah, okay. So when we say there are only two genders, we often confuse the idea of gender and sex.
Sure.
Sex is a generalization of XY chromosomes, so we assume that, or, XY, XX, combination of chromosomes. So we assume that, male and female comes from your chromosomes, right? But that's really just the idea that there's only two possibilities of sex, right? So even within sex itself, you can be born intersex, which means that you're born with sexual characteristics of both what we would consider male and female. And then you have gender, and gender is more about a mental state based off of societal norms. So within our Western society, we often discuss gender as being binary, meaning that there's two options.
Sure.
So boy, girl, man, woman. However, in other societies, non-Western societies, there are more than two options.
Okay, can I ask you a couple of questions there to unpack? Appreciate you taking the time, by the way. So what was your name?
Madison.
Madison. So let's go to the sex concept before gender, I think, because the idea of gender being different from sex is predicated on the idea that sex is binary. That's where you mentioned that term, gender binary. So you mentioned intersex. Okay, I'm aware of intersex. Now, of course, intersex doesn't necessarily mean that someone is completely between sexes. Usually they have very identifiable characteristics, like a very large clitoris or micro penis. In that case, it also affects 0.08. People think this is funny, it's just true. Less than 0.08% of population Earth.
But they still exist.
Let me ask you this, in human anatomy class, how many fingers are you taught human beings have?
We're told typically that people have 10, however, there are people born with 11
But you're
fingers.
taught 10, right?
Yeah.
So we don't teach people, there are people born with 11 fingers, there are people born with 12 fingers.
Yeah, but we don't completely dismiss that those people exist just because that they're uncommon, do we?
We teach that human beings have 10 fingers. I would wager that everyone here has been taught, human beings have 10 fingers, of course there are anomalies. That's the same way that we treat intersex, or these, as you said, you mentioned chromosomes, genetic abnormalities that are a very extreme case. So I think what we need to do is remove this extreme case with sex, just as we would with how many fingers, toes, how many kidneys you have, how many feet you have. There's something that's typical, there's something that's atypical. Then you go to gender. This is where, listen, I'm open. Everyone has said sex is different from gender, and gender is not non-binary. So I would allow you to kind of unpack that for me.
Yeah, so in Western society at least, so in our country, in our society, we tend to think of gender to be on this binary spectrum of not even really a spectrum, just a binary. So you have man, woman, and that's it. Those are the only two options. However, gender really is more of a spectrum. So it's non-binary. There are not just two options.
Okay.
You have man, woman, and then everything that doesn't fit into just man and woman is considered non-binary. That's an umbrella term, and that includes a lot of different categorizations.
So how many genders are there?
You can't put a number on the number of genders because everyone uses different words to classify themselves.
I would disagree. That's where it changed my mind. I'm not convinced that anyone can just use any classification for themselves for their gender, and certainly not that then we have to compel society to address them this way. Right, I'm sure you can understand that the compelling of language is an issue.
So what gender do you think you are?
Well, I'm a male.
Okay, well I think you're a woman.
No, legally I'm a male.
Oh,
it says on my driver's license that I'm a male.
Okay, so that's your sex.
No, I'm also a male.
It's your sex.
It says on my carrier certificate that I'm a male. Gender. Some legal documentation say gender.
What if I say I don't believe you?
It doesn't matter.
Exactly, it doesn't matter if you don't believe me.
No, it doesn't matter because biologically...
What gender do you think I am?
I would assume you're female.
Yeah, see, you're making assumptions.
Yes.
I identify as non-binary.
I don't, respectfully, it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
Now, let me ask you this. What would you say if I
It matters what pronouns you use. For me, it matters how I'm socialized in society. It matters my gender expression. It matters the way that I'm allowed to express myself. It matters what bathroom I use. It matters who I'm allowed to live with. It affects every aspect of my life. So you saying...
What pronoun should I use?
You should use they, them pronouns. So you saying that you don't believe me...
What if I don't?
If you don't, I would consider that disrespectful, and that's actually an act of violence to misgender a trans
It's an act of violence.
That is an act of violence to intentionally misgender someone, yes.
Here we come to the issue, and this is why I'm out here. You just said that's an act of violence. That means it's an actionable offense. That means it's a crime. So you believe that for me...
I didn't say it's a crime. I said it's an act of violence.
An act of
There's
violence.
a lot of things that are not considered crimes that are acts of violence.
Okay, so you believe it's a non-aggressive act of violence.
I think that, okay, when you misgender someone, if you were to misgender a trans woman...
Yes.
Trans women, especially trans women of color, are have the highest rate of murder within the LGBT community, right? So if you were to intentionally misgender a trans woman, that could put her at risk of murder. You understand that? Because people think because you're trans...
I don't understand.
I think that really does show that you're privileged in the situation then.
Yes, I believe we're both...
I think you're extremely privileged in the situation that you don't have to experience that, or that you don't have to worry about that, or consider that you don't feel like you need to respect people's pronouns.
I'm considering this and I'm asking you questions. You said these are the pronouns I need to use.
Yeah.
I said, what if I don't? You said that's an act of violence.
Yeah, I would consider that an act of violence against me.
Okay, so that's a crime.
Consider that
an act of violence against you is a crime.
I would consider that.
So,
I would consider you being disrespecting me as a person, and that's not okay, and that's not even ethical. It doesn't matter if it's legal, it's not ethical. And I don't know how you can do something that's considered unethical.
I don't know how you can not allow me to speak and ask questions based on your own premises. Please, we're trying to keep this civil. I haven't yelled at you. I haven't accused you of anything. You're getting very heated. You said that's an act of violence. That's a crime. Okay.
I didn't say that was a crime.
You said an act of violence against you is a crime. So
I did not say that.
You said it is an act of violence against you.
I said it's an act of violence, and I said misgendering anyone's an act of violence.
Yes, you said it is an act of violence against that person. That is in fact a crime. So here's my question. Since we've now decided we don't know the number of genders, it's a spectrum. It exists. There is no set number. You've asserted the premise that we are required to use the pronouns that are preferred by the individual. We have no idea how many pronouns there are. We can never know how many pronouns there are. And to not use a proper pronoun is an act of violence against them. Did you ask my pronouns before you sat down?
No, I didn't ask your pronouns because
Why?
I haven't referred to you with pronouns.
You didn't ask my pronouns, though. You just said you can ask.
Yeah, you can ask. What are your pronouns?
But you didn't ask.
What are your pronouns?
You just talked about me being privileged. You understand? No one goes around asking pronouns before they speak with people.
I asked you
and
how
so
you
to ask of a restructuring of society
I did ask you how you
based on a number that's not tangible with gender versus sex is something that is incredibly corrosive.
Did I not ask you how you identify yourself?
No, I don't believe so.
Yes, I did. I did actually. You said you identify as male, and that would...
After the conversation, sure. Okay, well, let's say that, sure. So we need to ask pronouns before every person.
Yeah.
And if we don't use those pronouns, how many pronouns are there?
It's the same kind of thing. There aren't like a limited number of pronouns.
So people can see the sign, would it be okay if you just step aside for just a second there?
There's not a limited number of pronouns.
Thank you very much. There's no limited number of pronouns.
No, I would say the typical ones are she, her, hers, him, his, her, his. Okay. Sorry, him, he, him, his, and they, them, theirs. Those are the typical number of pronouns. We usually use 3.
Okay. So I just want to, again, the goal is here to change my, I'm open to new ideas.
Yeah.
There's no set.
Yeah.
Different kind of space around us. I think no one's being accosted here. We're just having a conversation.
There's no question of accosting. We're just trying to bring the conversation so that it's not like a kind of like a separate stage spectacle kind of deal. So we're all in conversation around, and we can engage with your sign. And
sure, I appreciate it, but it's not though. It's a conversation between 2 willing participants right now, and I will go.
Other people talking as well, though.
I'm not. I don't consent. So.
So this is your setup, and we're supposed to just follow your rules. And this.
Yes, when one is invited and we've gotten the proper permissions, and I've said.
Open campus, a college campus.
Sure, it's an open campus.
We can actually do whatever we want.
You can do whatever you want. You can protest, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to be engaging in conversation with the crowd.
Necessarily have to be my rules.
What's your name?
No, that's not incorrect.
I'm a student.
But I would love to continue my conversation here. So when we talk about gender and sex, right? This is a very new idea. You said in Western society.
It's not a new idea.
Really?
No, it's not a new idea.
So when did gender theory start? When did gender and sex become separate?
Well, they're actually it's not necessarily the idea of gender theory. It's the idea that there have been different genders outside of man, woman for centuries.
Okay, how so?
Yeah, India.
India.
In
Sure.
India, you know, they have third gender. Native American cultures, they have third genders.
Sure.
In ancient Egypt, they had third genders.
Okay.
You know, so it's a very Western idea to say that there are only two genders and that this whole thing is a new idea changing our
Well,
culture,
you know what else is
changing
a very
our
Western
society.
idea? So it seems to me your presupposition there, correct me if I'm wrong, is that because other cultures have done this, there's a precedent.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think that
Well,
we're
you do-
hermetically sealed in any way.
So you do realize, and you talked about how very different it was from Western culture. So antithetical to Western culture, you named India, ancient Egypt. You know what else we also believe in that's antithetical to those cultures? We're against slavery.
Why?
just-
I'm sorry. I'm really confused as to why you brought slavery
Let me-
into
let me-
discussion
let-
about gender.
I would love to bring it up.
Yeah, that's kind of a
My
red
point
herring
is,
on your
because
part.
your premise is because it's found in other societies, therefore it's okay. Or it is to be good. My point
I
is
don't
there
see
are
how
plenty
it's
of other
harmful.
practices. Well, I'm trying to get to why I believe it's
Yeah.
harmful and you're explaining why you don't. But the point is if something was practiced in another society and it was harmful in another society and we agree that it's harmful, for example, we both agree that slavery was harmful. We both agree that maybe cannibalism is harmful. You can find these practices in societies. My point is it's not a valid argument to simply say it's been found in other societies if that practice is harmful. So it comes down to the idea of, is it productive or harmful for us to separate the idea of sex and gender?
Other on a form, like you said, the ramifications for that in legal.
Yeah.
So that's the question.
so,
Other societies have done harmful things. I think we can agree that
but I
doesn't
don't-
necessarily mean that it's
I'm sorry, I don't
it's
think
okay.
I don't think respecting someone's identity makes that harmful. I don't understand. I don't agree with you comparing gender identity to cannibalism or slavery. That seems pretty offensive.
I know, it seems you
Yeah,
think a lot of what I've
it's
said is
pretty
offensive.
offensive, yeah.
You've been set up here from the get-go for it to be offensive, and I'm not trying to offend. Let me re-explain what it is. Take any practice, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Take the practice of neck stretching, for example, which is not harmful, okay?
It is harmful, actually.
Okay, well, some people don't think it's harmful. They don't think it's harmful
Mm-hmm.
in these societies. Take any practice that's relatively benign that we believe to be harmful that they don't
Mm-hmm.
believe to be harmful. The point is, just because another society at one point has practiced it doesn't make it correct. Can we agree on that?
I'm sorry. I think you're making really false comparisons.
No, I'm not.
I do. I think you're
Can we
making false
agree? Can we
comparisons.
agree? Because listen, there are also many societies the other way, right, who've only ever recognized two genders, two
Yeah,
sexes.
but that doesn't mean
That's
that these
most.
other genders don't exist.
That's most. So you're implying that those societies were wrong.
I'm implying that they have their other societal standards.
Right.
Societal standards are based off of a lot of things. It's very intersectional what we decide to accept in society. So if you're going to say, well, because you're
So a society can be
essentially
wrong.
making the same argument. Yeah, society
Yes,
can be wrong.
exactly.
Society was wrong about gay marriage. You know,
Sure.
I think people are wrong saying that, you know, gay marriage, being gay is unnatural and being gay is a crime.
Okay.
That's society being wrong. But you
Sure.
know what? We adapt to modern times, and I think that we need
But
to
you
be
just
willing
compared us to
adapt.
ancient Egypt and India as though that was a valid argument for convincing
in
me
India,
why
in
they
India,
have more.
this isn't an ancient practice. This is still going on.
Sure.
In other countries, this is still
But
going on.
you just said it's not fair to use other societal comparisons.
I'm
because we
saying
adapt.
it's not fair to compare
You're the one
gender
who did
to
it.
slavery.
No. I'm trying to get to the
That's
premise of the
literally
argument.
what I
I'm
said,
trying to
is
get to
you
the
can't
premise.
compare gender to
I'm trying to get to the
slavery.
premise of your argument here, okay?
the premise
and I'm
of
trying
my
to keep this as very
argument.
respectful as possible. You said this has been practiced in other societies for a long time.
Yeah.
My point is that's not an argument because there have been horrible things, maybe benign things, maybe semi-harmful things in other societies. We would both agree on that. So it's not a valid
Arguing
argument.
to bring slavery back, though.
No one
That's
is
like
arguing
where-
to bring slavery
exactly.
back.
So why are you?
Well, actually, they are.
trying-
Of course, it still exists in other countries in the
Yeah,
Middle East and
so
some
I
countries
just-
that you've mentioned.
Like I said, I don't think you're making a fair comparison.
Yeah,
I think you're
I
kind
think
of
I'm
going.
making a very fair
I think
comparison.
you're kind of just going on a tangent in order to try.
My
and-
point is it's not an argument.
It is an argument. I think it's an argument.
Okay, so
I'm
I will
arguing
use your
that our Western standards
Okay.
are not necessarily the pinnacle of what we should be doing. Western societal standards do not mean that we all need to be following the same thing because we're not all Western and we don't all follow those beliefs. So if a Native American
Of
person,
course you do if it's the law. We all have to follow the law.
yeah, okay, so yeah, the law is different. I think the law is different than a societal standard. So legally,
Well,
I
hold
could-
on a second. How is the law different? It is the societal standard legally.
legally, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's stay
So-
within those parameters.
Okay, sure. So, there's other countries that are considered Western that would recognize a third gender.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So why not?
So how many genders are there? It comes back to if we're going to change this.
After Crowder made
negative statements about Fox News hosting on.
So we are sitting here talking about gender.
Yeah, so if I were,
So
as a person,
this is a modern theory in the United
Okay.
States, right? Sex
Can I
and gender
finish
were
this?
interchangeable.
Can I
No,
finish
I'm going to finish one sentence here, okay? I would appreciate that. You've been very privileged in speaking over me. I'm not convinced, right? The job here is for you to sit down and change my mind. And I think that's very productive for you to do with other people on campus. Right? I don't think this is a way to change somebody's mind.
I don't think you want your mind changed.
I have had
I
my
don't
mind
think you want
changed.
your mind
Well,
changed.
instead of assuming that, how about actively trying to change it? So my point is, you've mentioned that it's non-binary, but you haven't given me a number of genders and how we restructure society. You've merely pointed out that it's an act of violence to use an improper pronoun. See, I think that would have, you just talked about a societal standard. If the societal standard is using the wrong pronoun is an act of violence against somebody, I think that's an incredibly dangerous societal standard, and it's one that nobody can uphold consistently. Would we not agree?
Right. I said, I mean intentionally using the wrong gender. I mean, when you know someone's pronouns, you intentionally use the wrong pronouns because you don't agree with them or you don't recognize their identity to be real, that's an act of violence because that's purposely disrespecting someone. No one wants to be purposefully disrespected.
I believe me, I
purposefully
understand.
called you the wrong name all the time, how would you feel?
I would feel very disrespected if
Exactly.
you, for example, came in bombastically and other people interrupting. I'd feel very disrespected.
Hey, can she develop that active violence thing? Like, where does that take us? If someone
Yeah.
uses the offensive pronoun, it's an
Yeah,
act of
so
violence.
it's
Where does-
intentionally using the wrong pronoun. So if you ask someone their pronouns or they would correct you and say, no, sorry, these are my correct pronouns, and you continue to disrespect them, you have to understand how much that puts a trans person at risk.
Yeah.
So does that person go to get arrested for using the wrong pronoun, or like it's an
No,
act of
it's
violence?
act of violence. And I know that you like to say that an act of violence means that it's legally a crime.
It is.
That's not how I'm defining an act of violence.
It doesn't matter how you define an act of violence. This
Okay,
is the thing.
well,
We have to have
It
legal
doesn't matter how
definition.
you define an act of violence.
No, it
I'm
matters how the
sorry.
law defines the act of violence.
I don't think it does.
You don't think it matters how the law defines an act of
I
violence?
do. I'm saying that an act of violence does not have to mean that it's a crime. I'm saying that it's
an act of
disrespectful.
violence against another person, an unwilling participant, is in fact a crime legally. There's no way around
Okay,
that.
that's
Can we
great.
agree
So
on that?
let's- How about
Can we
let's-
agree on that? Let's find
I'm
some
gonna-
common ground. Can we agree an act of violence against somebody else is a crime and no one should commit it?
I'm saying no one should commit it. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily illegal, like a
Okay, but it is illegal.
criminal defense.
I'll
Okay.
allow
So can
you
I
to
finish-
assume what you want,
can I
but it
finish
is
my
illegal.
Earlier thought then?
I would like you to finish your earlier thought, but I think this is a very central point to the argument because this is one of the first things that you've said,
Yeah.
and we haven't found common ground. We don't agree on that. I do find that the idea of
Yeah. No. Can I hear
I
what
have
she has to say?
respectful questions, and she
I will-
wants to take my question. So since this is an equal setup,
Yeah.
so
No, I appreciate. Well, you can sit down afterwards and we'll have a conversation.
I wanna
No, listen. I would like to have a conversation with one person, and then you can all line up and have a
doesn't
one-on-one
mind taking my
conversation.
question.
But I do. I don't consent.
So it's
So
I think
I'll have a
you
one-on-one
should allow her
conversation.
to have the microphone, so that it's not just you shoving the microphone in her face.
I'm not shoving a microphone in her face. I'm
You
simply
are.
holding
This
it.
is what you're doing. So let her have the microphone.
But you just said this isn't. This is not an equal setup. I've paid for this microphone. This is my microphone. So would you like to have her take your place?
I would like to finish my thought that you haven't let me finish yet. Actually.
Okay. Do we have a time code? Do we have a time code? I believe it's been about over 30 minutes, but go
Okay,
ahead.
Yeah, so I would like to finish my thought because it actually hasn't been over 30 minutes. It's been less than 30 minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
So my thought is that you talk about legal ramifications. How many genders are there? Okay, so when you have countries that recognize third genders or non-binary gender options, you know how they put that on their form? Non-binary, other,
Yeah.
third gender.
Right.
How is that complicated?
Well, can I tell you how it's problematic?
How is that problematic?
It's problematic because you have people who've been sued, arrested, or put out of business for unknowingly using the improper pronouns, and that's the point that I'm making. There's been you're referring to a societal standard. What can be filled out on a form?
Yeah.
That's your premise. I'm saying there's been a societal standard, one that's biologically based, for millennia, which we've now changed, and we're punishing people who don't agree. So you may think it's disrespectful for someone to not use the pronouns that you demand. I think it's equally disrespectful to demand that somebody live in a spectrum that hasn't been agreed to, and they don't even understand.
What businesses have been put out? Who's been put out of business for not using the right pronouns?
Oh, in the UK, this happens all the time. In Canada, Bill
can you
C-16.
name a specific business?
Yeah, and Bill C-16 in Canada is really important. For example, we have comedians who've been put before human rights tribunals
So
for
Canada
using improper
recognizes a
pronouns.
third gender, though.
Yeah, Canada does.
Legally recognizes
Yes.
a third gender. So
Yeah.
the law is their legal standard. That's their societal standard,
Right.
right? So the people who aren't agreeing with that aren't agreeing with their societal standard.
Right, but it's a societal standard that flies in the face of biology.
But
and my
it's a
issue is,
societal standard that's legal.
so do you believe that people should be put before human rights tribunals for using the improper gender is biology? It was until 1948. You know that, right?
No, I don't agree with you on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, but when did gender theory start?
I don't know the year gender theory started. I'm sorry, I'm not a human encyclopedia.
Okay, it was 1948, Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler. These are people, by the way, when he started it, there were still only two genders. Gender was a grammatical issue, usually used to refer to as a noun. I'm French Canadian, so in French we have masculine and feminine.
Right.
It really is a very new concept and one that is not rooted in any kind of biological precedent to say that there are unlimited genders. That's the issue. And so when you are jailing people and punishing people for not adhering to an entirely new system that you yourself that you haven't defined, I do think that that's a problem. I think saying that somebody using improper pronouns is an act of violence against someone, I just disagree. I think that's a real problem, and I would hate to see
it's not disrespectful?
I think it's disrespectful to force somebody to use pronouns
I think
that
it's
are being invented by the day.
If I told, they're not being invented by the day. I don't know where you're getting that information.
How many genders are there? How many pronouns are there?
I can't define the number of genders or the number of pronouns.
Exactly,
I'm sorry,
because anyone can determine them. They are being invented by the day.
Yeah.
New genders each day.
So if I told you that I identified as, if I said, hey, I want you to use just my name, not my pronouns.
Sure.
Does that make you uncomfortable?
No.
Right. That wasn't hard, was it?
No, it wasn't hard.
Yeah, exactly. That's what people are asking you to do.
No.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, you have a TA. We just had her on the program yesterday, on Monday, who got in trouble for using the student's name because a student demanded that he use masculine pronouns even though she was a girl. And he said, "Listen, I'm not comfortable with that. I will use her
if it's
name."
Masculine pronouns, I believe that person would be using masculine pronouns, and you just misgendered them.
Yeah, you used the name.
You said her.
He used the name.
You just said her.
Yes. Yeah, I did because she's a female.
That's not how that works. I think
that is how that works.
So we established.
That is how that works.
You agreed with me previously that we established previously gender and sex are totally different.
No, I don't agree.
How do you know that person's a female?
I know that because of biology, and here's the thing: gender theory.
Did you look at them? Did you happen to just examine them and decide that person's a female because of what you saw? Is there external genitalia?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you genuinely feel that I've been interrupting you more than me? You keep saying you're not able to finish a thought. I haven't finished a phrase.
I think you just finished a phrase.
Okay, do we want to score points or do we want to be... I think you've been interrupting me quite a bit. And you just assumed a premise that I don't agree with. No, that's my point that I've not been able to make is gender theory, as you're describing it, is very new. It started with Simone de Beauvoir in 1948, and what you're discussing is the idea that actually came with Judith Butler. The first time there was this idea that there were more than two genders was John Money. I'm sure you're familiar with that case. That's very new. And there's no biological backing behind this theory. It is based on an emotive response. So I don't agree that gender and sex are separate. Legal documentation sometimes don't say they're separate. We're trying to adapt that now based on how people feel. And I don't think that we should adapt the law considering something an act of violence because someone uses a pronoun which is biologically correct because you consider it an act of violence against you.
What's a biological pronoun?
He, her, his, her.
How do we determine that?
Whether they're male or female.
Yeah, but how do we determine that's... What if we decided that she, her, hers was what we were going to use for males?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We right now.
Yeah, right now.
We have male and female.
Now, so that's
his or her.
Current standard, right?
No, it's a biological standard.
The words that we use are based off of what we as a society use, though.
Not
right?
entirely.
Yeah,
no, they're a reflection.
Linguistics is pretty societally based.
Okay.
I would say.
Amphibian.
What about amphibians?
Is that societally based?
Amphibian.
An amphibian is I don't. You know what? I'm not a science major, but I will say an amphibian is a scientific classification of an
reptile.
Animal. Yeah, it's a classification of an animal species.
Bush, tree, blueberry.
Yeah. Okay.
Are these societal terms?
Point?
The point is that language is a reflection of standards that we have as a society. Are doctors sexist?
I think some doctors are sexist.
Are doctors transphobic if they refer to their patients who have a penis and they come in for a prostate exam as a male? Is that doctor hate speaking? Is that an act of aggression?
I think if that doctor misgenders their patient, then yeah, they are being transphobic.
Okay. Well, my mind has not changed, but I think I tried to find some common ground. I'm sorry that we didn't.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that you feel that way.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madison.
I'm not going to shake your hand.
I figured.
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.